Right, hi guys, welcome back to another flying lesson. We're back at Elstree in our Jet Ranger, and we're going to have a look at turns, because our last lesson we did straight and level climbing and descending. So in this lesson we're going to be looking at turns and some basic auto rotations. So we're at Elstree, the weather's fairly nice, no clouds in the sky, no wind to make anything more complicated. So we'll get going and we'll have a look at doing some turning. I've just finished editing a video of an MD600 flight review, a real one, which I'll upload to YouTube once we finish this. Nice and gentle takeoff, as I've not actually been on this much over the weekend. Try not to embarrass myself. I think that was better than the 600 takeoff yesterday, he says. Right, let's head out on route Bravo Elstree and get going. So we'll get up to a couple of thousand feet, and then we'll have a look at doing a few turns, and then we'll have a look at doing a few climbing and descending turns as well. And we'll be looking at the errors that can happen when you're making turns, and the instruments we'll be looking at. Hopefully by next week I should have X-Plane 11, so it should look a little bit more modern. But this week we'll still be struggling through with X-Plane 10. So I'll do our normal flight out, we'll head up towards Potter's Bar, and then we'll just follow the motorway out towards Enfield. For you guys that are watching, just give me a thumbs up if the audio is okay. If it's not, let me know. Andrew Domain, thank you very much. Good morning to you. We'll get to 2,000 feet, it's a nice round number, and then we'll try and get the power and the attitude for about 80 knots. Okay, so we're level 2,000 feet. Just get the speed on 80 knots. So the first thing you have to look at when you're making a turn is something called parallax error. What this means, the aircraft is going to rotate around its roll axis, but we're not sat on the aircraft's roll axis. In this case, we're sat to the right of it. And if you're in the left-hand seat, you'd be sat to the left of it. What that has a tendency to do, because we're using the horizon out the window as our external reference point, when we roll the aircraft left or right, it will appear as if the nose is going up and down and the attitude is changing whilst we're turning the aircraft. So what tends to happen is when you're making inside turns, so in our case that would be a right hand turn, you'll have a tendency to dive towards the ground. And when you're making a left hand turn, when sat on the right hand side, you'll have a tendency for the aircraft to climb. So all we're going to start with is just a gentle right hand turn. We're looking for between 15, speed's terrible, between about 15 and 20 degrees as we make our turn. As soon as we've rolled the aircraft the amount that we want to, we look back inside of the aircraft to check our speed, check our altitude, seeing if we're going up or down, and then back out the window before we make any adjustments. Going a little bit quick here, but we'll live with that. And so your eyes are moving between the outside world to see what's going on, see where the aircraft's pitching up or down, whether your roll is staying constant, and the inside world on your instruments to see what the aircraft is doing. And then you're making little adjustments as the aircraft's going around, trying to keep it on the numbers as the aircraft is turning. And the same, we'll just roll out there. If you go around the other way, roll the aircraft to the amount that you want. Check inside on your instruments, speed, altitude. Make adjustments as required whilst looking outside again. And just keep changing your eye line from outside the window to back in on your instruments. Might just have a look at the VSI. There we go. Told you it would climb in a left-hand turn. Try and put that right as we go around. We'll get it back towards the motorway if I can find the motorway. There's Enfield. There's the motorway. So if you're trying to roll the aircraft out onto a specific heading or in a specific direction, depending on how quickly you're turning, you need to roll the aircraft out before you get there. Let's pick an obvious point. In fact, we'll use the compass. If I pause it for a second. Compass is down here. North is the 0. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a left turn onto north. Similar sort of angle of bank we had on the last one. Get the speed right. If I wait until I get onto north, onto the heading that we had, there we go, and then roll out, I'll overshoot the heading that I want. So if we go back to east, what you need to do is start rolling out before you get to the heading or the object that you want to fly towards. And how early you start rolling out depends on how quickly you're turning. So we'll start about 5-10 degrees before, and there you go, on the heading. So those are basic turns. If you want to do climbing and descending turns, you just need to break it up into different segments. So we did climbing and descending last time, so we'll start with a descent. So we're going to do power, attitude, trim, reduce power, hold the attitude for the speed. Once we've established ourselves in a descent, still trying to hold our 80 knots, then we make our turn. Again, looking outside to start with, checking inside to see what the aircraft is doing, and then back outside again to make any adjustments. And then ideally you want to finish your turn before you then level off, and from a descent, power first, then attitude, and then trim. Same with the climb. Attitude, power, trim. So attitude first, increase the power. Once you've got yourself nice and stable in a climb, you make your turn. Whoop. It's almost as bad as my flying yesterday. Get it back round onto the motorway. And then finish your turn before levelling off. The reason you do that way is just to keep it simple. You can obviously enter a climb or descent whilst in a turn and level off while still in the turn, but it's just that bit more complicated if you've already got the aircraft rolled left or right and you're trying to see what the aircraft's attitude is doing, i.e. the nose going up or down, as you're making power changes as well. One thing I didn't touch on, probably because this is a simulator and not the real aircraft, before making any turns, treat it like a T-junction in your car. Have a good look left and right. So if you're going to turn right, have a good look left, have a good look right, and then when you're happy there's nothing there, make your turn and round you go. That's obviously if there is something on your right, you don't want to turn into it, and if there's something on your left, you don't want to turn and have the thing fly into the back of you. You want to know where the traffic is before you start turning. But turns are very straightforward, he says. So we'll move on and have a look at auto rotations, and then once we've had a look at basic auto rotations, we might just do a little casual flight. We'll probably do Annecy to Courchevel in the French Alps, because that's one of the trips I've done for real, and it's quite pretty. So let's break all the airspace around London, take the aircraft up to about 10,000 feet, which will give us plenty of time to look at the auto rotations. Jet Rangers do not climb at 3,000 feet a minute. Not even the best ones. They will not climb this quickly. An MD-600 will climb this quickly. The Jet Ranger won't. So I've got just a normal Thrustmaster joystick and throttle. I've got it set up the same as you'd have in an aeroplane, so my throttle forward is up collective and back is down collective. It's just a muscle memory thing. It would probably be more realistic if back was up and forwards was down, but it's that crossover between real and the simulator, and I have to kind of work. I'm used to using joysticks being forward is more and back is less, so that's what I try and use. I'm all over the place when I'm talking to you, so that's what I try and use in the simulator as well. The difficult part using a normal joystick, I think I've said it before, it's because it's sprung loaded, it always wants to go back to the center, and real helicopters, their controls don't do that. When you move them, they kind of stay put, or you have to hold them in place. So when you're trying to apply a constant forward pressure for speed, or a constant left, or a constant twist, it's quite tricky. Of course, if you take the effort out, so if you let go, everything goes back to center, and the aircraft goes all over the place. But this is actually not that bad. I mean, I normally fly the 119, which is fully stabilized and very smooth. I was flying a 600 yesterday, which is not. And actually the amount of movement in the aircraft, if you look at the video later, it's very similar to what we're getting here. It feels like a lot, but it's just fairly normal. So we'll get it up to 10,000 feet, and then what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to stop the engine in this. Hopefully it will work. It's quite funny, my other half was a bit concerned once we had our little girl. What happens if what's she going to do if something happens to me while we're flying along? So I have like a heart attack or something. It's unlikely, but she spent an entire afternoon playing this so that she could take off, fly a circuit and land again. After about an hour she made herself a bit unwell, but after about 2 or 3 hours she could actually take off, fly a circuit and land again. It wasn't a pretty circuit, but she did it. It's a fair play to her. So before you do an auto rotation, you do something called a Hazel Check, which stands for height, the height at which you're going to enter and the height at which you're going to recover, the area you're going to do it in, obviously not over a town, Safety of the aircraft, looking for loose objects in the cabin that might move around, get stuck in the controls, etc. You do a check of engine temperatures and pressures, and if you're flying a Robinson, if it's not a fuel injected one, you'll be using the carb heat. And then your L is a good lookout to make sure you're not going to fly into anything as you're coming down. So let's level off. So most helicopters auto-rotate around about the same sort of speed. You're looking at the sort of 55 knot region for an endurance or minimum rate of descent auto-rotation. You're looking at the 65 knot area for a normal auto-rotation, and about 75 to 80 knots for a maximum range auto-rotation. So we're just going to look at a very basic 65 knot auto-rotation. So let me pause it again. Down here, below the airspeed, is our engine and rotor RPM, and what we'll be looking for is a split between the engine needle and the rotor needle. So to enter auto-rotation, it's just like a normal descent. We're going to reduce power, make sure the nose doesn't drop, and make any corrections for yaw that we have to, and we're going to take the power all the way to the bottom. There's the nose dropping, and you can see we're getting a slightly higher rotor RPM and a split in the needles. So let's actually throttle the engine all the way back. So our rotor RPM is too high because our collective is too low. If we raise the collective, the rotor RPM will come down, and if we raise it again, it'll go back up again. Let me see if I can get rid of the engine altogether. That should make life a bit more interesting. There we go. So after we've entered auto-rotation, we're looking for doing our trimming again. We're looking for our 65 knots with rotor RPM at 100% as we're coming down. If we slow down, initially we'll get a rise in RPM followed by a drop in RPM. So that's disc loading increasing, giving us an increase in RPM, and then as speed decreases, it reduces. If we push the nose forward, we'll get a drop in RPM, and then as the speed increases, it will go up again. So that's unloading the disc as we push forward, and then the airspeed building it back up again. Let's just bring us back to our 65 knots. You'll get the same thing happen in turns. If you roll the aircraft quite steeply, you should get, as you make the turn, an increase in RPM. Tightening the turn up, yeah, there we go. And as we roll level, we'll get a drop in RPM, or should do. There we go. Same going the other way. If you make a steep turn, you should get an increase in RPM, which then decreases again as you roll the aircraft level. So the aim, maintain your 65 knots, he says, wobbling all over the place. Adjust the collective up or down for your 100% rotor RPM. This is the problem with a sprung loader joystick. And making adjustments in yaw to keep the aircraft balanced. And just maintain that, and that's your helicopter gliding. That's the airflow going through the rotor disc, producing enough of a force on the rotor blades to keep them spinning at their normal speed, and just accepting the rate of descent, which is about 2,000 feet a minute. It's not that high in a real Jet Ranger. A real Jet Ranger, you're looking at about between 1,400 and 1,500 feet a minute rate of descent. An MB600 will come down at about 2,500 feet a minute. So let's see if we can restart the engine. This will be funny. Whilst we're coming down. This probably won't work, but we'll give it a go. Can we hit the engine restarted and not destroy the helicopter before we get down? There you go. One restarted helicopter. If you do have enough height to spare, or altitude to spare, in a real engine failure, that's exactly what you try and do. You get the thing into autorotation. You try and restart the engine if you know why it's failed. Typically, if it's run out of fuel or it's exploded, you're not going to restart it. The only reason you might restart it if it's a weather issue like icing or something has stopped your engine, or somebody has pushed the wrong switch, then you might try and restart it. Otherwise, you just accept the fact that your engine has failed, you switch it all off, and you fly the aircraft. So that's a basic autorotation. We'll head back towards the airfield and land. We're just coming down the M1. This is the M1 A41 junction. And then we'll move the helicopter over to Annecy. And we'll do a scenic flight up to Courchevel. What I might do quickly is check what the actual weather at Courchevel is at the moment and see if we can go up with real weather settings or just have a nice day weather settings. So I take it you're into your flight sims. Do you fly in? Do you fly real aircraft as well? Oh, so you've got all the toys. I guess it just depends, doesn't it? I mean, I'm very lucky in that I fly for a living. But the downside of flying for a living is you can't afford all the nice toys. Okay. Yeah, one of life's cruelties. Yeah, if you fly for a living, it's more like a hobby in the sense that you absolutely love what you do, but can never afford to do anything else. So my setup at the moment is fairly basic. I have just upgraded the computer with a new motherboard, so hopefully everything is running a bit smoother. Oh, that wasn't too terrible. Try and hobble the thing over to the helipad. Yeah, some people go to huge lengths to have a really realistic experience. Ah, was it last week I went past Stapleford 4 times in the 119? Just running a guy backwards and forwards to somewhere in Suffolk. R44s are quite nice. I've done a lot of flying on R44s. quite a bit of cross Europe, a little bit into Switzerland, lots of stuff around Scotland. It's a really good sort of day trip helicopter. Not so good when the weather's rubbish. I want to go quiet when I'm concentrating. I'm like this in a real one as well. Concentrating so I can't talk and fly at the same time. Okay, let's see where we've parked that. That's not bad. They get the tug underneath it there. That'd be fine.